Chapter 62. Finding Jobs, Late 1940s, Turn into an Apricot Talk. H. Fed up and leaving. He tuned into an apricot and busted out of the place. Earl Harness was unsure of what career path he would follow now that he was home from the Army. Before the war, he had enrolled to begin school in Conway, Arkansas, with plans to study dentistry. 4 years had gone by, and he was no longer interested in starting school again at age 26. In the harvest season of 1945, the Harness family went to California to work in the fruit harvest. Riley Harness, wife Melinda, adult children Earl and Troy, and the younger children, Roy, Reva, and James R., went in a farm truck so they could haul produce from the orchard to the market. Sheridan Hogue, who later married Ora Hawkins in 1937, a sibling of Jim Hawkins, drove his truck out west with the Harness family aboard. The 1940s in California saw a huge growth in immigrant population desperate for work. The war and FDR's New Deal brought many good-paying jobs. Construction of dams and canals brought water and power to the Central Valley, and farming was booming, but growers were complaining of a labor shortage. Many crops needed pickers, and there were many opportunities for families to use their children to help in the harvest. Earl was the only one of the boys who had previously seen California. Before the war, he and his brother Clifford had worked on the Shasta Dam in Northern California, and he had seen some of its amazing farmland. Cherries were harvested in June in California, and the apricots came in late June. The Harness clan arrived just in time to pick cherries. Since the 1800s, the San Joaquin and Santa Clara valleys, Silicon Valley today, have produced lots of these delicious fruits. A variety of a sweet cherry called the Black Republican was the parent of the huge developed variety called Bing cherry. It was named after a Chinese grower and developer, Bing. All cherries, apricots, peaches, and plums are native to China, where they have been cultivated for thousands of years. Few fruit trees are native to America, the pawpaw being the largest native fruit, which grows in the Ozarks. Riley Harness had never seen or tasted anything like the sweet cherries they were picking. Harvesting involved climbing a ladder and pulling clusters of the cherries with their stems attached and filling a fruit pouch that had a bottom flap to quickly offload the fruit into a crate. Anyone picking could sample them as they worked, and by day's end, Riley had his belly full of sweet cherries. When evening supper time came, he drank some sweet cow's milk mixed with cornbread. Immediately, he got an upset stomach with violent pain and gas. He thought he was going to die. Afterward, Earl said that Riley was careful about combining fruit and milk. When the Harness clan moved on from the cherry harvest to the apricot harvest, it was nice to eat a new fruit. A lot of apricots then and now are made into dried fruit. The natural sweetness comes with good fiber, minerals, and vitamins. Eaten fresh from the tree, they are juicy and like peaches and plums, usually picked when firm and not fully ripened. Rarely will you find a stone fruit that is juicy in the supermarket due to rapid spoilage when fully ripe. The Harness boys, who were often bored when not working, liked to irritate one another for entertainment. They learned that they could carve a face into an apricot with their fingernail and then squeeze the fruit between the thumb and forefinger to make its face move up and down. This animation turned the apricot into a squishy face, and by adding some vocal noise, you had a talking apricot. The younger boys soon discovered that Sister Reva feared the talking apricot. So, They would back her into a corner and pull out a talking apricot and pretend it was going to attack her. Reva was very strong, and she would mutter, "Me getting out of here." With her strong arms, she would shove the boys aside and bust through with her escape. In time, the boys used the expression, "turn into an apricot," of a situation where you had all you could take and were ready to bust out. Before the return trip back to Arkansas from California, Troy bought himself a car. Traveling home, the fuel pump started failing, and Troy had his youngest brother, James R., sit on the fender and pour gas into the carburetor reservoir as they drove down the road. I imagine that James R. turned into an apricot way before the old car turned into the farmhouse at Belafonte. The fourth Harness son, Perry Harness, did not go with the family to California for the fruit harvest, but rather enrolled at Drawfon's Practical Business College in Little Rock, Arkansas. Many returning servicemen from the war used the GI Bill to receive up to $500 along with a cost of living stipend to continue their education in college or a vocational school. In 1947, half of those enrolled in college were using their GI Bill to finance their way. This program opened the door for higher education to the working class in a way never done before. After 1 year of business education, Perry graduated from Drawfon's and returned to the family home in Belafonte. His first job was a door-to-door salesman with the Fuller Brush Company. During the war, Alfred Fuller had made brushes for the Army to clean guns. His son, Howard Fuller, became the president during this time, and soon after the war, he began in earnest to make brushes for the home once again. Alfred Fuller learned the art of selling door-to-door from experience and went on to write an autobiography called A Foot in the Door, which described his salesmanship techniques by prolonging a conversation to turn it into a sale. With his training, Perry Harness soon learned how to deal mostly with housewives he encountered making impromptu calls to sell brushes to homes in Boone County. He was the modern-day version of the traveling peddler of the past, but with only brushes. Upon discharge from the Army, S.R. Sergeant William Earl Harness was examined in New Jersey, where he was mustered out of the Army and found to have a nervousness condition. He was awarded with a 50% disability by the Veterans Administration in the amount of $50 per month. His disability didn't keep him from dancing, and every opportunity he had, he would go dancing at dance halls in the area. A favorite place was called the Roxy, which stood at the top of the hill on the south side of Harrison. Today, the Oasis Apartments, formerly Oasis Motel, is built on the site. Another place Earl loved to dance, but it was a distance to travel, was the Basin Park Hotel in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. On the top floor of the 6-story building was a ballroom with a hardwood floor. Big bands and swing dancing had been popular during the war, but a dance called the Jitterbug became a favorite of Earl's. The dance involved a couple who moved their hips while their shoulders stayed level and their feet glided across the floor. Earl and a dancing partner named Skidder won a dance competition doing the Jitterbug. In time, the Jitterbug was an early dance of Elvis Presley with his new style of the popular rock and roll music, performed with his jittering movements. By day, Earl was looking for ways to earn money, so he sold used cars that he bought or traded. Because the war had ended the production of most cars, the used car market was great if you could find someone willing to sell their used car. Earl and Perry would park a car on the square in Harrison or in some prominent place where they would put a sign inside the windshield saying, "For sale." While this brought them some income, Earl went to work for Audie Coker, who owned a grocery and feed business. The store was in a building still in existence at 1021 N Main St., and Earl bought Mr. Coker's store and business. It came with some acreage, which Earl briefly had a few cows on. The hillside land would one day become the site of the Ramada Inn. While he was owner, Perry Harness would deliver feed for his brother in his car for 15 cents within a reasonable distance. The store, renamed Earl's, would later be sold to Frank Myers, who moved the business to the north end of the Crooked Creek Bridge, where it remained until the flood of 1961. Prior to the flood, Frank Edwards bought the business, but when it was destroyed, he moved the grocery store to 719 E. Stevenson Ave and named it Edwards Grocery. Troy Harness attempted to sell Fuller brushes under his brother Perry, but with less success. While odd jobs could be found, a steady job was not easy to acquire. But Troy got a job driving a local freight truck, which he had experience doing while he was in Okinawa during the war. A freight company owned by Pete Harp, which was located at the corner of North Walnut Street and East Prospect, currently J. Smith Henley Federal Building, was hauling local freight. It was later sold to Ben F. Garrison Motor Freight, and would go through some name changes over the years, but eventually was sold to FedEx as their ground freight division. Troy took a job at Oberman's Garment Factory in the freight department. The Oberman factory in Springfield, Missouri, relocated a salvaged building during the war, with the ownership of the building belonging to Moscow Cash Sr. The factory became a large employer of women who worked as seamstresses. While Troy worked there, he took interest in a business down the street that made mattresses. Mr. V.K. Mullins first hired Troy to work making mattresses, and in time he became a partner and then the owner of the business. The mattress shop was located at 120 E. Stevenson St. in Harrison, and was torn down after the flood of 1961. Unlike the mattress that Troy had used growing up, being made of hay, wool, feathers, and cotton, the use of inner springs had been developed in Carthage, Missouri, by Leggett and Platt. The mattress covering, called ticking, was a heavy cotton fabric with pinstripes and woven so that down feathers would not stick through it. The inner springs were sandwiched with a layer of unfinished cotton. A box spring base was added to make the mattress even more comfortable and to hold it in place. Troy, in later years, would advertise with this slogan, "The rest of your days depends on the rest of your nights." The Harness brothers teased Troy about him not staying with a job, but when he saw the opportunity in making bedding, he stayed with that career path for over 5 decades. He did not marry until he was 27, which was the age of his oldest brother Earl when he married. Charles Clifford had gotten the jump on the brothers with marrying and having children. During a time that Clee was living in Harrison, he bought a large Army surplus truck that had an open cab like a tractor. He offered to give Troy and Perry a lift into town, with the condition that he would stop before reaching the town square and let them out to walk. The boys were too ashamed to be seen in the oversized piece of junk, but Clee never slowed down and circled the town square 2 times before giving them a chance to bail out. Clee was never embarrassed by the things he drove or the clothes he wore. Reflection. Most men find purpose and an identity through their work, because work looms so large in life. Many of us tend to prove ourselves by what we do for a job. We may point to our career as our success until there is failure or termination. While work is necessary to support most relationships, it should not compete with quality time spent with the Creator and loved ones. The days of our lives are 70 years, and if by reason of strength, they are 80 years. So teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Psalm 90, 10, 12.